Hello, everyone. Welcome. Thank you so much for joining us right now. I know it's early in the morning, but we just really appreciate your presence here with us. My name is Andrea Gunraj, and I'm at the Canadian Women's Foundation. Just want to let you know that today we're going to talk about some difficult things and just give you a heads up about that content. It could be difficult for you, it could be triggering for you, and I just want to let you know that if you need to take a step away or if you need to go and do something else and take care of yourself, that's totally fine. We're talking about the links between gender-based violence and the massacre that recently unfolded in Nova Scotia, Canada. As we start this discussion, first off, I would just like to acknowledge the work of the Canadian Women's Foundation and the programs we support take place on First Nations, Métis, and Inuit land. We're very grateful for the opportunity to meet and work on this land, but we recognize the legacy of colonialism and that land acknowledgements are not enough. I think that it's really important for us to mention that we know we need to pursue truth, reconciliation, decolonization, and allyship in an ongoing effort to make right with all our relations. So, as mentioned, this discussion today will focus on the connection between gender-based violence and the shootings that happened in Nova Scotia a few weeks ago. I'm here today with Keitha Mercer, my colleague at the Canadian Women's Foundation. She's the Director of Community Engagements and Grants, and she's going to discuss it with me. Thank you for joining us, Keitha.
Happy to be here.
Our hearts are truly broken, I think, all over Canada. I'm seeing a lot of comments and reactions, and I just can't imagine the loss and the pain that people are feeling right now. Friends and family and community members who have been directly impacted, but everyone, because Nova Scotia is such a close-knit community, from everything that I know and the folks that I know who are there. Our colleagues and you, Keith, that have been in touch with folks and programs who we support there, is there anything that you can share about how people are managing and just getting through the processing of this?
Yeah, I mean, lots of organizations that we've talked to have said that they've been warning about this kind of incident for years, especially in rural communities where there's not a lot of access to broadband internet or transportation. Women are really at risk, and many organizations have said that they have been working on this issue. They've been scared about this issue happening, and they've been warning about it for a long time. We can't underestimate the amount of work this is for organizations to support whole communities on a given day, on any given day. But when we talk about in the context of COVID, when you can't, go to spaces, you can't bring people together to mourn, you can't do face-to-face counseling, you can't hug your loved ones, it's really complicated. So we've heard of some organizations that are doing online counseling for both their staff and their communities. And doing the best they can to support in the ways that they already have been through, this COVID pandemic, and more generally as organizations that support communities that have experienced violence. But yeah, it's a hard time for everybody.
I really want to thank and just extend our gratitude to the community workers and the folks who are just doing this work in community right now at a really difficult time for everybody, but really much more difficult in a pandemic situation. So thanks for mentioning that. So of course, we've learned in the news and just as information rolls out that this incident or a series of incidents actually started with an act of intimate partner violence. And I think this is something that we were actually worried about long before the news actually officially came out. We were texting each other and messaging and just saying that we had the sinking feeling that gender-based violence was a root cause of something here. So Keitha, why did you go to that place right away in your mind as well too?
Yeah, I mean, I think it was something that both you and I said to each other was one of our first thoughts. And it's because it's really common. I was trying to find stats this morning, and it's difficult to find reliable ones. But in reality or in reporting, we've seen that many of these mass murders situations, whether they're shootings or otherwise, start with acts of domestic violence. From Sandy Hook to the Orlando shootings to this one, it began with warning signs around violence with family members or partners, and escalated from there. So these are not random. There's actually lots of signs, and we're ignoring the connections.
And I think you mentioning those particular incidences, we obviously were thinking about the van attack in Toronto that had happened, the Montreal massacre, and lesser known situations as well too. There was connections between the killer's beliefs about women and sexist attitudes and who they ended up targeting, and even why they felt that the use of this violence was warranted. I remember hearing and learning about December 6th, and recognizing that there was some resistance in the beginning to talking about some of the systemic and the cultural factors. The idea that this person hated feminists and hated women. They had attitudes about gender that were really sexist. Some people, though, were strong in linking it to just the overwhelming rates of gender-based violence that are still pretty overwhelming today. There's not much change in that. And then other people, of course, saw it as an individual madman situation. They talked about mother issues. It was this kind of narrative. We saw a group of Nova Scotian feminists recently writing a statement, and that got into the media. It's a very strong statement urging for clarity on the femicidal aspects of these murders and demanding an inquiry, and making sure that there's a feminist analysis here. And just for folks, you may not have heard the term femicidal. It's related to femicide. It means basically murder of women because they are women. So, Keitha, why is a gendered lens so important here? Why are people pushing for that right now?
Yeah, I mean, similarly to December 6th, the Toronto van attack, from the beginning, there was lots of folks, calling out the misogynist nature of it, the fact that, women were targeted, which, there was resistance to as well. And I think has now been started, through discovering online writings, etc. There's been a lot more evidence supporting it. I think it's a lot of things. I think having a feminist analysis is so key, because if we don't, we're missing the root causes of this. These are not random in the sense that we don't know where they're coming from. We see the ways that toxic masculinity, so like the ways that men are not allowed to have feelings and discuss them and seek out support, the ways that women are treated in media, politics and power, in terms of like being seen as less than, and also the fact that gender-based violence is still blamed on the victim so often in justice systems, in news, etc. That the fact that gender-based violence is the root cause of so many of these incidences is overlooked, because it's not something that people want to look at generally. So I think, it's the way that we look at these is that they're random, unforeseen acts of someone with mental health issues. But in reality, the mental health side is rarely proven. The domestic violence and gender-based violence side very often is proven. So we're looking at the wrong thing, and it's costing people's lives.
I think you really bring up two important points there. The blaming tendency that our society has. It's a cultural phenomenon, actually, that we immediately go to that place. And I have to say that over the years, I've been exposed to really great narratives and thinking around not blaming the victim. And yet I'm even challenged. I have to kind of force myself to think differently, because it is such a thing that we're taught and that we learn, and it's our number one thing to go to the woman and say that, you know, she should have known what would have happened or it was her fault. I saw some tweeting going around just after the murders, and that it's was related to gender-based violence, and people were saying that the person who this happened to should have known that this person was dangerous that she was with. So it's just an issue that we really do have to challenge, and we have to insist on challenging it, even within ourselves. That's really important for us to do, because again, we will miss important elements and things that we need to do, the ways that we're implicated in this. The second thing I think that you bring up is the lenses, you know, the mental health lens, and people might apply a psychological lens to these things, look at personal history. For me, I feel like these lenses, they're not wrong to apply. I think they're very important to apply. I think they give just a slice of the full picture. These things are complicated and there's lots of elements to them. But I think my issue, and I think I'm speaking for you, is that when the gender lens gets put to the back burner or not even thought about at all, when we don't act on that, then we're missing a really important part of the picture that we're all, again, implicated in, and that we have a role to play. And maybe that's where the resistance comes from, is that when we're all implicated, suddenly it's not that person over there, it's us, it's our communities, it's what we think, it's what we teach our kids, it's, you know, all those things that we have to actually do something about. So yeah, those lenses really become important when we're trying to look at solutions. And of course, my mind does go to solutions, stopping it before it starts, intervening to reduce harm. So just give me a sense about the programs the foundation supports and how they're addressing this. And, you know, do you feel that they can interrupt this violence, this really shocking violence, but then also the smaller kinds of violence, or the kinds of intimate partner violence that nobody would see and it doesn't make the news, but it's all kind of part of the spectrum?
Yeah, so the Canadian Women's Foundation, one of our, you know, key pillars is around preventing violence before it happens. And what we do is we support programs throughout the country that work with 10 to 19-year-olds on healthy relationship skills. And this is with all genders, so everybody has this information. And it's things like, you know, setting and maintaining your boundaries, healthy communication, and conflict resolution, talking about gender stereotypes and, you know, what is embedded in the ways that we think that we are supposed to move in the world, and the ways we think other people are supposed to move in the world. Identifying signs of an unhealthy relationship, you know, things that would, you know, be normalized in, you know, public, like, oh, he's just jealous, you know, he loves me, that's why he's, you know, monitoring my Facebook or my social media. Having those conversations and really breaking it down, talking about, you know, what your rights are to privacy, what your rights are to autonomy over yourself, and you know, talking about, you know, where to get supports also if you notice unhealthy behaviors, either in yourself or in your friends, in your family, that kind of thing. So, you know, having these conversations with young people early on helps to, you know, start to process all of this information that they've already been absorbing around, you know, what a relationship should be, or normalizing what, you know, like negative relationship patterns. And also, you know, they take that information home and they have those conversations with their siblings, with their parents, and we all start to learn more about what healthy relationships are and what kind of future we want. The Canadian Women's Foundation also supports interventions into violence, so shelters, sexual assault centers, counseling programs, child witnesses to violence. You know, it's, you know, supporting people who've experienced violence also helps end violence. Getting, you know, supporting women in our economic development through our economic development programs, and you know, helping families become stabilized, have more choices, to not be reliant on an abusive partner for housing, food, etc. You know, they're all interconnected, and this is why the foundation, you know, does the work we do.
Thank you, Keitha. I want to ask about boys, or boys and men. I think a lot of the times these programs that we support and other folks support really do focus on those who are experiencing violence and those who are at risk of violence. Many times that's girls, that's trans and non-binary people. But I want to talk about what needs to happen for men and with men.
Hmm. Yeah, and that's one of the reasons why our teen healthy relationship programs is for all genders. And I mentioned it earlier around toxic masculinities. Um, the rigidness of gender stereotypes affects all of us. So toxic masculinity is not that, because you're a man, you're toxic to everybody around you. It's the fact that like the rigidness of who you are supposed to be, or who, society tells you to be, and the stigma around any kind of, deviation from that, any stepping outside of that, can really limit, boys and men's ability to be whole humans, free to express all of their feelings, have relationships that are, vulnerable and mutually supportive, and be able to talk about, the things that are challenging, including their own experiences of violence. So, when we talk about ending gender-based violence, this is not about women, preventing violence against themselves. It's about a whole culture shift around how we view relationships and power. So, when we work with boys, we're talking about, breaking down like the pressures that they feel to be, whatever, like the guy who dates a lot of women without feelings, or the pressures they feel to be tough and boys don't cry, and that kind of thing, in the ways that limits, their ability to live their lives.
Thank you so much for giving us those examples. It really stunned me back in the day when I was doing some of this work directly with young people in schools. It was really interesting to me that a lot of the young men that I was working with, they were teenagers, preteens, and teenagers, really so smart and so able to see the man box. They would always, talk about that man box, and how the qualities that are valued in a man and allowed in a man, and the qualities and ways of expressing themselves that were not as welcome. And they were able to break it down. Like I never had to explain the man box to people. People got it right away. But then when we would ask the question, are you, now that you're able to break it down, or you're already able to break it down, no problem, how do you get to live out being outside of the man box? And people would have a really hard time expressing that. They weren't able to do it. So it's like that dissonance of knowing that you don't want these pressures on you to stop you from being who you are, but not even having the space to work that out as a young person, and feeling like you'd be punished, is a huge thing. So my heart really does go out to young men. And I think it goes out to anybody who feels placed in a box because of their gender. We know that happens to women, and we know that happens to everybody, but I think it's very unique for young men. And of course, it leads into things like intimate partner violence and a lower quality of life, a lower capacity to deal with your own issues. I believe it leads to mental health issues, all these things. It's a really important topic for us, and I'm really glad that the foundation supports healthy relationship programs for all genders. So thank you so much, Keitha. We really appreciate this discussion. As somebody has said, commented on Facebook right now, we need to respect men enough to allow them to express their feelings. And, we need to address male violence against women, and make sure that it's men doing this. So we have to work with them, and we have to support them, and we have to actually create spaces for them to challenge one another. I think that's really important, and support and challenge one another. So, we're almost at the end of our time. We're going to wrap up this discussion, but I think for us, it's really important to remind everyone that we're seeing more rates of gender-based violence that's coming up now in the COVID-19 pandemic. Women's organizations all over the country are just sounding the alarm that this is an issue. And I think we also have to think about the young people who may be witnessing this violence at home now more, because they're all together now in the space. And I think that we might see the reverberations many years down the line, because there's tons of research that shows that if you see it and if it's playing out, this is modeled for you, that you're more likely to then play it out in your relationships later on. So it's a concern today in the pandemic, the violence, and it's also a concern into the future when we might see the outcomes of what we're going through right now. I think that's why interventions like shelters and crisis lines are so important right now, but also the prevention work with young people, the healthy relationship works, the things that help people longer term be able to unpack this stuff. And I think that they must be really struggling right now to keep going, Keitha, as you've seen in your work and in your discussions with programs all over the country. So I just want to encourage you that if you would like to support this work, and if you are able financially to support right now, I'd encourage you to go to canadianwomen.org and support our emergency response effort. We have a fund, and we're really trying to support these programs to make sure that they continue to stay open, not just now in the coming months, but a year from now, 2 years from now, where this financial hit that they're experiencing and the increased need might really create issues for them for sustainability. I think it's really important. We have to remember that the programs that people rely on are so important, and we can help. I know this is a very tough time financially for people, so I just want to let you know that every dollar counts. Whatever you can give will help. And if you can just raise awareness about the fund, that's all you can do right now. It is good and it's important. And we're just thankful for you, and thankful for the ways that you're challenging this violence and challenging gender inequality, period. So many thanks to all of you. Thank you so much for your comments, for joining us. And I think we might revisit this topic again in the coming weeks. I think it's a really important, it's a big topic. So please have a great rest of the day. Stay healthy.
Wait, before we go, Andrea, let's do the signal for help.
Oh, the Signal for Help. We didn't even talk about the Signal for Help. The Signal for Help is a campaign that the Canadian Women's Foundation helped launch, and now our partners in the States are also taking it up, and people around the world. It's a very simple signal that anybody can use in a video call to let others know they need help. They might be in a dangerous situation. It doesn't leave a digital trace. So Keitha, you can help me do it right now. It's just this on screen. And we hope that it'll be a tool to help people, if they're in a dangerous situation, to let others know that they need help. And what you do when you see this signal, you check in with that person safely. And that can look different for different people, but that could be WhatsApping somebody and saying, reach out to me when you get a chance, I saw you. Or emailing somebody, or just calling somebody and asking yes or no questions, and letting them take a lead on what you need to do to support them. So yes, the Signal for Help, you can go to our website as well, canadianwomen.org, and find more about that, as well as resources that you can use to refer to somebody who needs help. Okay, on that note, thank you very much. Have a great rest of the day. Stay healthy, stay well, and we'll talk to you later. Bye-bye.